Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris, and with me, as always, is anxiety-riddled Mike. How are you doing today, sir?
Oh, apparently I'm full of anxiety.
Yeah.
So I guess I could be better.
It's all the extra music that's going on around you and the chaos that's happening. Are you wearing a blue suit?
Yeah, well, that's my normal attire every day.
Yeah, all right. Also with us is not Justin this week, but we have a very special guest, Chris Galegar from The War Starts at Midnight. How are you doing today, sir?
I am great. Thanks, guys, for having me on.
Oh, it's our pleasure, for sure.
Yeah, as I like to call him, Chris 2.0.
Yes. He's a little bit better than I am, actually. So yeah, he's like the upgraded version, yeah.
Did not fall asleep during Long Day's Journey into Night.
Yeah. For those of you that are longtime listeners, a while back, Chris and I actually, he lives here in Houston, and we got together and we went and saw Long Day's Journey into Night, which I fell asleep about halfway through, embarrassingly enough. And Chris had to explain everything to me. So thank you for explaining it to me, Chris. And
I'm not sure I caught it all myself, but that's definitely one that I can't wait for a physical release of, because I need to see it again.
Yeah, for sure.
Me too, because I need to see it for a first time.
Yeah.
Just take some caffeine.
Definitely. Well, you know what? I don't make the same mistakes as you, Chris, because I know how to pace myself. I look at the runtime before I go into a movie.
But it's so warm in the theater.
It's so cozy.
Yeah.
All right, if this is your first time listening to the show, this is a Casually Criterion episode, which is a Criterion Collection-focused episode. We do every other week where we review a film from Criterion Collection that is voted on by the listeners. Before we get to the main review, we'll be doing our usual News on the March, where we talk recent news and things we've been watching. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, you can still listen. Then we'll move into our Casually Criterion review for Punch Drunk Love, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, spine number 843. Guest Chris Galegar.
Yes.
Usually, I like to start off every episode with a fun, topical question. But since you're the guest, I thought, why don't I throw it over to you and see what you have? Do you have an interesting question you could start off the episode with?
Yeah, I got a question for you guys. Especially since we are doing a Casually Criterion episode, I've been curious and actually considered writing in to ask you guys, is there anything in the Criterion Collection or that has been in the Criterion Collection that hasn't made the leap to Blu-ray yet that you guys are dying to see the upgrade for?
I've got mine. Chris, what about you?
I'm still working on mine, but Mike, let's hear yours.
All right. So this is a film that came out in 1964 that does not have a Criterion Blu-ray that I really love. It's black and white. I love 60s era black and white. And that is a Japanese film called Onibaba.
Onibaba. I don't know this one.
Really? Okay, so I guess its claim to fame would be that it inspired The Exorcist, the mask. If you look up Onibaba right now, there'll be a picture of a mask.
Okay.
That mask inspired The Exorcist. But yeah, it's very interesting. Have you ever seen Kiriniko?
No, I haven't. I know this cover art. Now that, like, as soon as you said it, I was like, I bet it's, yeah, I'm looking at it now.
Yeah, it's a wonderful movie. It takes place in a war-stricken Japan in the feudal age where basically this woman who is married to a soldier who has been long gone and probably isn't coming back is left with her mother-in-law. And they're basically stranded out there by themselves. And one of them's a young girl in the prime of her life, and one of them's an old woman who needs this young girl to stick around, basically. And it's kind of what happens in between. And it's just a really fantastic movie, and I love it. And if it came out on Blu-ray, you better believe I would have it pre-ordered.
That actually sounds, that sounds like one that could be a blind buy for me, just based on both your description and your recommendation of it. This sounds like one that's right up my alley.
Definitely. Well, if you like it, check out a movie called Kiriniko.
Okay.
It's a Japanese movie by the same director, and it's basically a ghost story, like a Japanese ghost story. He really likes these horror themes mixed in with tragedy and human suffering. It's really interesting. I definitely recommend it.
Sounds lovely.
Yeah, well, I like happy stuff. And that is by Kaneto Shindo, by the way.
Okay. I don't think I've seen anything from him.
The only other movie I've seen from him is a movie that was on Hulu a long time ago when Criterion's films were all on Hulu.
Yeah.
It was called The Naked Island.
Yep. Haven't seen that one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a lot of obscure stuff. But anyway, if anyone has seen this movie, write in. Let me know how right I am for wanting this movie on Blu-ray.
No dissenting opinions, please.
Yeah. I don't want to hear those.
Yeah.
But Chris Reeves, our Chris number 1, Chris 1.0.
Yeah, so I got mine, and it's actually kind of surprising that it's not on Blu-ray yet. And that's The Bat Sleep Well by Kurosawa. And that's another black and white film that would look pristine in a Blu-ray format. So, yeah, that would be one that I would like to have. And it's a great movie, I'm sure.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
That's a really great movie.
And I don't think that one's had any even like DVD upgrades since the old, like before the Criterion C was added, back when all the Criterion discs just had the line across the top.
Yep.
If that makes sense. I think it's like, if you go pick it up today, I think that's the design on it still. So that one needs some love.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that cover art's not great.
It's just like that red circle.
Fine.
Yeah, it's very early days of the Criterion collection, though.
Yeah.
I feel like they could do a lot better now.
Yeah, for sure. Get Mike Mitchell or somebody on that.
Yeah, so that's a great pick, Chris. Good job.
Thank you. How about you, Chris 2.0?
The better Chris.
There's a few that I'm always looking for. Like there's some Carol Reed stuff, though I think some of the Carol, like I know Third Man's out of print now. Well, Third Man got a Blu-ray, so that one doesn't even count. There's a few Truffaut films, but the one that I'm always hoping for is Kicking and Screaming. Not the Will Ferrell soccer movie, but
bummer. That's what I thought.
But the Noah Baumbach, his very first feature, which is, it's a small little film, but it is a lot of fun, very funny. It's about it's essentially about this group of friends who have just graduated college and still hanging around town and don't really know what to do, and their antics and what's his name? Fucking hell. He was Marty McFly for 2 days.
Eric Stoltz.
Eric Stoltz. I'm so glad that worked. Eric Stoltz is sort of this older guy. I think his name is Chaz. He's the bartender at the local bar that everyone hangs out at. And he's always giving them philosophy and stuff. But it's sort of about this in-between period of life where you're not quite an adult, but you're definitely not a child anymore. And these friends trying to figure out where they, kind of where they go next in life. And just it's one of those first features where you're like, I kind of hate you because I don't know, he was like 26 or 27 when he made this film. And it's Baumbach. I mean, if you're familiar with Baumbach's work, it's him straight out of the gate. Like the dialogue, the very acidic wit, all of that is there. It's a really fun movie, and I would love to see it get the Blu-ray treatment because it, while it was, was made fairly cheaply, it still looks pretty nice too.
Yeah, that's the famous movie with Quentin Tarantino's Top Gun monologue in it, right? Or am I completely off base on that?
No, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know what the monologue you're talking about, but that's not the same movie.
Okay, well, never mind then.
I think that movie's called like Sleeping with Other People or something like that.
I thought it was in Kicking and Screaming, but
yeah, I can't remember. I showed my girlfriend that exact monologue the other day whenever Top Gun 2 stuff started coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Top Gun 2, soon to be on Criterion Collection.
Yep. All right, so that was a good question. Thanks, Chris. And I wanted to go ahead and get out of the way real quick. Chris is the host of a podcast himself called War Starts at Midnight. So we thought he would be a good slide in to replace Justin this week since Justin is busy. So Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about your show?
Well, on each episode, I, along with my co-hosts Jacob Graves and Peterson Hill, discuss either a film from a director's filmography or what we like to call our war crimes, which are films that we hate to admit that we haven't seen. It's sort of a way for us to hold each other accountable, and kind of we will rag on each other until whoever hasn't seen, I don't know, for instance, a couple years ago, Jake had never seen The Thing. And so I made him watch The Thing, and he's been ever grateful to me for it. Generally the war crimes turn out that way. Sometimes we're not so thankful, but at least, we can mark it off the box.
Right.
Over the past year and a half or so, we went through all of John Carpenter's filmography, and that was really rewarding. It actually came off of the review of The Thing. Jake wanted to get more into John Carpenter's stuff and was like, what if and he's always coming at like at least 5-6 times a week, he's coming up with another crazy idea of, what about a podcast about this?
Right.
But he came and said, what if we did a podcast where we just talked about John Carpenter movies? And I was like, actually, that sounds like an amazing idea. Let's
that sounds like a good way to spend some time.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's going to listen, but I don't even care. So we went through John Carpenter's stuff. We called that limited series the Carpenter Shop. Now we have just started up what we're calling the Magnificent Andersons. And serendipitously, it is about the films of Wes Anderson and P.T. Anderson, because while they are very different directors, I think there's a lot to like sort of compare and contrast with them. And they're more similar than you may think. And also, they're coming up from about the same time. They generally release films back to back, or in the same like year of each other, so they have sort of the same run. And they're also some of the only like sort of bigger name directors, even though they're not making $100 million films, but they can still make whatever they want and get a decent budget to do so. And there's not a whole lot of directors that can do that these days. So
no.
I thought it would be interesting to kind of follow both of them and see where they dovetail and where they don't. And also just an excuse to go back and revisit films or catch up with films for the first time, because like Jake hasn't seen a lot of PTA stuff and he sort of drags his feet on PTA. And so like my mission of those reviews is to get him to come over and like see what's so great about him and look at him as I think Jake thinks he's a pessimist, and I'm trying to bring him over to see that like, no, there's comedy, there's love, there's hope, there's all of these things in PTA films. Mm-hmm. So we have the first 2 episodes of the Magnificent Andersons out. So that is Heart 8 and Bottle Rocket. We have been storing up a cache of reviews to kind of get them all in the hopper for, to release a steady season. So should see Boogie Nights coming out soon, and then Rushmore and et cetera, Magnolia, Royal Tenenbaums. Punch Drunk Love will be coming up probably in a few months.
Awesome.
So keep an eye out. I'm excited to discuss it there, but I'm also excited to discuss it here with you guys.
Again, that is War Starts at Midnight. If you wanted to go ahead and look them up, we highly recommend it. Okay. If you want to follow the show, you can follow, subscribe to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at casualcinecast. You can email us at casualcinemedia@gmail.com. And of course, you can always leave us an iTunes review, preferably, or subscribe. Subscribe your friends, pick up their phones, subscribe for them. They'll thank you later.
And we'll thank you now.
Yeah. Thank you.
I've subscribed.
Thank you,
Thank
Chris.
you. Yeah, that's awesome.
You're quite welcome.
All right. And with that, gentlemen, what do you say we go ahead and move into news on the march?
Let's do it. Oh, look at that. Synergy.
Yeah, the Chris's strike again.
Yeah. Wow. All right.
News on the march.
All right, guest Chris.
Yes, sir.
Since you are the guest, and this is totally spontaneous, we're going to go ahead and throw it to you. What's been on your mind this week? What you been up to?
I've actually, for me, been watching quite a bit lately. Normally, I'm pretty busy, but there were some things that needed to be seen. First and foremost, Lady and the Tramp. Okay, so my son got Lady and the Tramp this weekend, and rewatch it. And I will say, that movie looks way better than I remembered as a kid. The story itself way worse than I remember as a kid, but damn, that movie looks great. It's in like super wide 2.35 cinema scope. It's like the animation is amazing.
Was this the 60s?
I think it's 55.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's early. I mean, it's early color, early everything. It's pretty amazing. And that was kind of what blew me away. Story wise, it doesn't, some people might call it a little problematic today.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. I also saw El Camino, which I know you guys just put up a bonus episode of, and I'm kind of in the same boat. I might be a little more lukewarm than you guys were. I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. I think, for me, the biggest thing that I've been struggling with is the fact that obviously it's a movie that is totally unnecessary. But I think it also is almost the fact that Breaking Bad was so cinematic as it was, kind of works against El Camino as a movie, because then you're expecting that much more. And I don't feel like it really broke beyond anything Breaking Bad had done visually in cinematic grammar. And that brought me down on it a bit. But overall if you've seen Breaking Bad and you haven't seen El Camino, you should definitely see El Camino. It's worth it for the Jesse story, but it's not, I don't know, like you could not put it in canon. I think it would be fine.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interview. Let me ask you this. So if you were watching Breaking Bad again,
yeah,
because Chris, I don't know if you've listened to our bonus episode yet, but Chris and I actually talked about this, and he was kind of the same boat you are, which was that it's not necessary. It felt like, you don't need it. And I agree. But I would also say that if you are a fan of Jesse Pinkman, I think it's necessary to complete his arc. Otherwise, his arc is very lackluster at the end of Breaking Bad.
I think that's sort of a little bit the point, though. A little bit.
That could be true.
It's in this place where it's almost tangential, like we can have Jesse have that conclusion or not. I don't think it really affects much. It is nice to spend more time with that character. So there's that. It was worth the 2 hours and whatever change or whatever it was to
sure.
To go through. But I think if I'm going back through Breaking Bad, I probably won't go back through El Camino.
That was my next question actually to you, was like, if you ever rewatch the series, would you find yourself adding that on as a nice epilogue to the series, or would you just stop at Felina? And it sounds like you would stop at Felina.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it if I was watching it with someone else for the first time. They're like, oh, I'd like to see the movie. I want to see what happens to Jesse. Mm-hmm. Yeah, fine. But I wouldn't insist either.
Would you... One last question. I lied. Do you think that if they hadn't waited 6 years, if they had waited like 1 year, do you think you'd have the same reaction?
I think it actually would have felt even slighter. Because I think, especially, like, I hate the way that second season the final season played out in sort of being broken apart and being, it was ultimately more episodes, but less, like, it was just sort of a pain in the ass.
I was splitting season 5 when it's really 2 seasons. Yeah. So I feel like coming off of that turmoil of just like waiting, and I was watching Breaking Bad week to week from season 2. So I was used to waiting. There were times when there were episodes where it's like, I don't know if I can survive this commercial break. Yeah.
So if they had, concluded it and then like a year and a half, 2 years later, El Camino comes out, I think it would have been less satisfying, because it would have felt like, oh, well, it's an even shorter, more tourniqueted, like I want the whole meal again, versus like I've gotten it all out of my system. It's kind of, I've put Breaking Bad on the shelf. And so it was nice to spend another 2 hours with these characters and not in a place where I feel like, okay, now I want to see him again next week. If that makes sense.
It does. Yeah.
Okay.
Totally. And we can go ahead and move on. But for more thoughts on El Camino, listen to the bonus episode that Chris and I just put out like a day ago, or by the time you're listening to this, probably like 3 days ago. I think we're slightly more positive on it, but I think we share a lot of similar thoughts. So
yeah, I liked what you guys had to say. I recommend listening to it.
Well, thank you. Anything else you got going on this week?
One other thing, I'll just pass by it real quick. I noticed that we're not discussing The Vanishing today.
No, someone thought Punch Drunk Love was a better movie to go along with the theme of villains than The Vanishing. So we won't point fingers, but
I'll just say that I no more than an hour ago finished watching The Vanishing again for the first time in like 10 years, and it definitely holds up. Cool. And I watched it purely because I knew I was coming on here and it didn't win, so I wanted to say, hey, if you haven't seen The Vanishing and you have the Criterion channel, it's October. It's the perfect time to watch a movie that's like, it's got sort of a this just creepy thriller feel to it. Definitely like something Fincher I could see being inspired by a bit. Like if there's no way he doesn't enjoy this movie. Because it's a little sick and twisted, like in that it's having a little fun with this really dark premise, but just so well made, and so like it doesn't ever get fantastically big, which makes it just that much creepier, I think. Check out The Vanishing if you haven't seen it, or revisit it if you have.
Yeah,
it's
and
great.
This is obviously not the American version with Kiefer Sutherland and Jeff Bridges, right?
And Jeff Bridges, correct. No, I did not watch that one, which directed by the same director, but not a Funny Games thing where it's shot
Still
for shot.
good.
It's apparently hot garbage.
Yeah. I saw this movie quite a long time ago. I've only seen it one time. This was my choice. If we would have gone this route, I would have been quite happy. I might watch it again soon anyway, just because you're making me remember just how awesome it is.
There was a lot that I didn't remember. I mean, it's been a decade, and so I was pleasantly surprised by just like how much there was to dive back into.
Oh, yeah. Well, I remember very distinctly when this movie ended. I can maybe count on one hand the amount of movies that have disturbed me the way this movie has. And I'll leave it there, but it's a priceless feeling.
Yeah, it is.
It's like the first time you read like an Edgar Allan Poe poem when you're like a little kid, and like it has that dark, twisted, like, oh man, that was dark kind of vibe. Or like the first time you like hear like the real version of the Grimm fairy tales,
cutting off toes and such.
Yeah, you're just left disturbed more than anything.
Yeah.
I think that, to me, that is more priceless than any jump scare, any, like, that to me is horror, that kind of unsettled feeling. And The Vanishing has that in spades.
Yeah, that guy could be a real like I could imagine that happening versus like Leatherface, even though it's based on real events, like less likely to happen to me, I think.
More fantastical, harder to believe. Yeah. Yeah, totally. Have you seen this movie, Chris?
Oh, yeah. I really like it, and I agree with what you guys are saying. It's too bad that we have to do Punch Drunk Love this week.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Darn.
No, but for real, spoiler alert, I'm happy to do Punch Drunk Love.
Yeah.
Chris, 1.0.
Yes. So one of the things that I watched this week was Mr. America. A few weeks back, actually, it's probably about a few months back, I talked on here about On Cinema, At the Cinema. It's a movie review show with Tim Heidecker and Greg Turkington. Well, I fell into that hole and watched all of them, and it goes to some weird places. Just the little TV show with 10-minute clips. Tim Heidecker's character accidentally kills people with vape pens and goes on trial, and there's like a whole long trial that's like 3 or 4 hours long that you can watch online. Yeah, it's crazy. It's like this like inside joke thing. But so he won his trial, his murder trial, and got off by a hung jury. But he was so mad at the attorney general, maybe it's not attorney general, the other lawyer that was prosecuting, the prosecuting attorney, that he decided that he was going to run for that position. And then he came out with a movie called Mr. America, and that shows him running for office. And it's a 2-hour movie. Actually, it was in the movie theaters for like a couple of days. This is a really fun movie, but I think it's one of those movies that you have to have fallen into this on cinema universe, which is a weird thing to say, but because there's so many inside jokes and so many odd asides and things that are happening in there that it doesn't work if you're not already a fan. You couldn't just pick up Mr. America and start watching it and enjoy it, I don't think. It's got a lot of bad reviews, and I think that that's probably part of the reason. One of the things I think is really cool about the movie, though, is it was all shot in one day. Like, they just went out and shot this movie in one day and then put it together. And for having shot it in one day, it looks really great. It's really well done. I'm sure there's a lot of improv that's happening here because he's talking to real people as he's trying to campaign. So there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. But like I said, if you're not a fan of the On Cinema at the Cinema show and you haven't followed the trivials and trials that these people have gone through, that's probably not for you. But I would recommend starting On Cinema at the Cinema and checking it out. I give this movie 5 bags of popcorn. If you are a fan, then you'll understand.
So your On Cinema at the Cinema is basically a prerequisite for Mr. America.
Yeah. So just as kind of like, so On Cinema at the Cinema
and the trial. Do we need to watch all of the trial as well?
You could probably do like a YouTube like.
How many hours of
clips.
content is this?
Yeah.
Most of the time when I watch this, it's like late at night. But so On Cinema at the Cinema started off and they were just doing these things. Then Tim Heidecker decided to make a TV show called Decker, and it's like the worst TV show ever. And there's like 3 or 4 seasons of that you also have to watch.
Oh my God.
But they're all like 5-minute longs, like they're on Comedy Central, they're aired like 5 to 10 minutes long, So it's not very long. It just seems like it's a lot of content. The trial is long, and they also do each year. They also have an Oscar special where like these crazy events happen in these Oscar specials. It's a lot. It's really like very like the mythology on this, or if that's what you would call it, but it's very deep. You really have to dive into this. And many late nights when I couldn't sleep is how I got into it myself. But
then you were rewarded with this feature-length film.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's more. There's like they're actually doing another season, and it's like coinciding with the film, so they talk about the film, and
my God,
it's really ridiculous and kind of.
It seems so ambitious for not being very ambitious.
Yeah, I mean it's so weird, and like I've actually joined. It's so weird. Like the community around this is crazy. Like if you go on Facebook. People like kind of role play as Tim heads and Greg heads, and so they're always arguing about the different things that are happening on Cinema. It's a unique situation that I don't imagine I'll see again.
Well, I have been enlightened today, guys.
Yeah.
This went way deeper than I was expecting.
Yeah, that was a rabbit hole and a half.
Yeah, it's deep. So. Yeah, that's what I've been doing this week, besides El Camino. How about you, Mike? What's up with you?
Well, I'll make this very brief, because I'm pretty sure this might come up later, but I will just say that this last week, my girlfriend and I watched a Criterion film called Black Narcissus.
Nice.
And this is, of course, the movie that was directed by Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger. And this is probably one of my favorite movies in the Criterion collection. It's about a bunch of nuns that try to open a convent in the Himalayas, and it does not go well. And I'll leave it at that. But yeah, we'll go ahead and just move on. Like I said, it'll probably come up later in the show. Hint, hint, wink, wink. But yeah, I say we go ahead and move into our review of Punch Drunk Love. What do you guys say?
Let's do it.
Oh, messed up.
Okay. And then before we move in, stay tuned after the show, and we will be announcing the next Criterion Collection picks for our next Casually Criterion episode. And you guys will be able to vote on Twitter.
I wanted to ask you something because you're a doctor, right? Yeah.
I don't like myself sometimes. Can you help me?
Barry, I'm a dentist.
Hi, this is Georgia.
This is Barry Egan.
So what do you do, Barry?
I have my own business.
We have a non-breakable handle. Let me demonstrate for you.
You're married, aren't you?
No.
Barry, it's your sister.
There's this friend of mine from work, and I want you to meet her. This is Lena.
Hi.
Hi.
Do you have a girlfriend?
No.
Must be weird for you to have so many sisters.
Actually, no, it's very nice.
Remember we used to call you gay boy and get all mad?
What's that?
We were calling you gay boy and you got so mad.
I saw your picture, and I really wanted to meet you.
What are you lying?
I didn't want to get too far along on going out and be hiding something.
This is Barry.
Hey, it's Georgia.
How did you get this number?
I was wondering if maybe you could help me out with some money.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
You've just made a war for yourself that you can't afford.
I'm going to Hawaii on Friday.
Hawaii? I was thinking about going there.
Really?
I'm gonna start a collection of puddings and coupons that can be redeemed for frequent flyer miles.
That's insane.
This is Barry.
You canceled your credit card.
That's a bunch of bull! Get your supervisor on the phone!
Yeah.
What's your name, sir? You're sick. No. Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Are you threatening me?
Yes.
That wasn't good! You're dead! Ow!
And all at once I knew at once I knew he needed me.
I have so much strength in me, you have no idea.
The day I died, I knew he needed me.
I have a love in my life. It makes me stronger than anything you can imagine.
He needs me, 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 he needs me.
All right, as always with our Criterion Collection films, we do not have a spoiler section. It's been out long enough that you probably have seen the movie if you're listening to this. So, heads up, that was your warning. Punch Drunk Love was directed and written by Paul Thomas Anderson. It stars Adam Sandler, Emily Watson, and Philip Seymour Hoffman. The IMDb synopsis says, psychologically troubled novelty supplier is nudged towards a romance with an English woman, all while being extorted by a phone sex line run by a crooked mattress salesman and purchasing stunning amounts of pudding. I read that weird, but that's the synopsis.
That was written weird.
It was written weird. Thank you. I'm glad I'm not the only one who thought that. Are we sure this is from IMDb? This is a terribly written synopsis.
That's where I got it from.
All right. Okay.
I do like the stunning amounts of pudding addition there to it.
Yeah. Okay. Why don't we go ahead and throw it to our guest, Chris? What is your relationship with Punch Drunk Love? Have you seen this movie before? What are your thoughts on Paul Thomas Anderson, etc.?
Oh boy, questions. Well, my thoughts on Paul Thomas Anderson. Right now over on War Starts Midnight, we are actually doing a limited series called Magnificent Andersons. So we're actually going chronologically through the films of both PTA and Wes Anderson. For me, Punch Drunk Love has been my favorite PTA basically from the start, or since I saw it, I guess I should say. I'd seen Boogie Nights before it. I'm not sure where it falls in with Magnolia, but this is the first one where I was like, okay, no, maybe I do like Paul Thomas Anderson, and in a like, not in a way that like I didn't dislike Boogie Nights. I didn't, but he was a guy who, for me, for whatever reason, was a little, I guess, pretentious. Like, falsely in my mind, he was pretentious. I've since come to realize that he really isn't, even if his films can be perceived that way. But this film was just, I think, because of the velocity of it and the weird humor of it and everything, it just spoke to me in a way that his other films at the time hadn't, and it clicked. And so, yeah, going into it, this was already my favorite. And so, but it had been a while since I'd seen it. So it was sort of me challenging especially as I've been diving deeper into his films and really like getting into him, does it still hold that that place at the top of the mantle? ... Let's find out.
Indeed.
What about you, Chris? What's your relationship with this?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked because, well, first off, I love Paul Thomas Anderson. I loved Magnolia. Like, I saw that in the theaters. That was one of the ones. So I kind of got into him early, and I liked his movies. I liked Boogie Nights and Magnolia. Always really enjoyed his films. And this movie is one of my favorites. I'm right there with you. Like, one of my favorites of all time. And returning to it was like returning to an old friend. And I was reminded of why I loved it so much and why it held such a high esteem in my, like, enjoying of the movie. And I love the way that the music plays in this film. I love the framing of the film, the color of the film. This is one of those, I think this is one of those miracle films, like with Adam Sandler in it, like where a lot of pieces came together. Adam Sandler turns in such a great performance in this that he fooled me, because the movie that came out immediately after this one that he was in was Anger Management with Jack Nicholson. And I was so excited for that movie because I thought Adam Sandler had turned a leaf and was going to start being serious. And so I thought that this movie was going to be a serious movie. And so I went and watched it, and I was so disappointed because it was nowhere close to this movie, which I should have known. But anyways, yeah, so go ahead.
Uncut Gems coming out soon.
Yes, Uncut Gems. And then what's the other one that's a Noah Baumbach's movie that he was in that I have not seen?
Oh,
he's supposed to be
the
really good.
Meyerowitz Stories. It's on Netflix.
Yeah,
it's pretty good. He's very good in it.
Yeah, I need to check that out because I think there's like probably 2 performances of Adam Sandler's, and Meyerowitz Story would be one of them, and then this one, Punch Drunk Love, that are really great. Unless I'm missing one, but then
he was in that drama with Don Cheadle, Reign of Fire, but I wouldn't know if that was a great one or not. I don't really remember that movie that well.
No, Reign of Fire was the. Wasn't that a dragon movie?
No, that was the one where like, oh wait, no, Rain on Me.
Rain on Me, yeah.
yeah. Rain on something. Yeah. Good call. Reign of Fire was the Christian Bale, Matthew McConaughey dragon movie.
That's what I thought.
Which would have been made
was like the post 9/11.
Yeah, that was the drama. Okay, well.
Yeah.
But which one's better?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't seen either.
I've actually seen both. I think Adam Sandler being in Reign of Fire would have made the movie better, and Christian Bale being in Rain on Me would have made the movie better.
The perfect synergy.
Yeah. But yeah, anyways, I love this movie, and I can't wait to dive in further with you guys. So, Mike, do you or do you not like this movie? That's the question here.
Why, yes, I do. Paul Thomas Anderson has been a director that I have had a great affection for quite some time. I first watched Boogie Nights when I was in high school, which was probably the perfect time to watch a movie like Boogie Nights because it blew my mind, basically. It was funny. It was dramatic. It was disturbing. It was epic. You know, it felt like really expanding my horizons for what, 14-year-old me had seen at that time.
Yeah, sure.
So I sought out all of Paul Thomas Anderson movies after that existed up to that point. And then when There'll Be Blood was coming out, I watched that in theaters. And then I've seen all of his movies in theaters since then. And Punch Drunk Love is a movie that I've always liked, but my main movies that I really love from Anderson were Boogie Nights and Magnolia, at least at the time, because those were the first ones I saw. But in the years since then, Punch Drunk Love is the one that I always come back to. And every time he comes out with a new movie, I'm always like, this reminds me the most of Punch Drunk Love. And it's been doing that ever since The Master. He always comes back to these characters that remind me a lot of Barry Egan, but darker. And I think Barry Egan is this character that is just so innocent, but also he terrifies me.
Yeah.
Right? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so,
absolutely. Yeah.
And so he terrifies you like a villain would?
Oh, I see what you're trying to do. Maybe not quite as much of a villain as the antagonist in The Vanishing, but I see where you're going with this. No, but Punch Drunk Love, it's a great movie. I love it. I own it on Blu-ray. It's not my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson. It's still not. But it's a movie that I watch, and every time I watch it, somewhere between halfway and 3/4 of the way through it, I'm always flabbergasted by like how I don't just remember how awesome this movie is and why it's not my favorite.
That's can be every Paul Thomas Anderson movie though.
That's
to
true.
An extent.
That's true.
They're so dense.
I agree. But this movie, I think maybe because it doesn't have he's been using Johnny Greenwood for his scores recently. Maybe it's because there's no Johnny Greenwood here. It feels so different.
Well, and this is the last thing that he did with John Bryan.
Mm-hmm.
And feels like the kind of magnum opus of their working together. Because I don't think John Bryan didn't do Magnolia, but he worked on Boogie Nights and he worked on Hard Eight as well.
Mm-hmm.
But like this like feels like almost the blueprint for what then Johnny Greenwood picks up with There Will Be Blood, with the noises and the propulsion and the way music is being used. It's
anxiety to build anxiety.
Yeah. Well, that's like watching it this time, I was thinking like, I wonder how all of this reads on the page, because there are scenes that are more or less just dialogue that, you know, there might be a bit of a quick pace to them, but without that music pushing the scene, it would have a totally different tone reading it. And
even watching, like I imagine editing it together before the score was in, it would probably just be an extremely painful movie to sit through. They
actually had a lot of the music even while they were shooting, or pieces of the music as they were shooting, like long tracking shots. They would actually shoot to rhythms that John Bryan had put together for PTA to play on set to kind of hit things.
That's interesting.
And then a lot of the like percussive underscore stuff, apparently John Bryan just gave them stems of like, okay, here's all of these little layers, and you can put as many or as few as you want together underneath, and they'll match up.
Yeah, I saw that on the Criterion disc, which is really awesome.
Yeah, so we almost gave them a Rector set of score that, you know, as much or as little anxiety as was needed could be thrown in there. And it's just, I mean, there's so much, I think, like the way the music was built here and then the way it also plays out is like a microcosm of everything that works about this movie, because there's so many little things where it's just like perfectly constructed in just the right way. From, I mean, things as simple as the costume design, and like that blue suit is so perfect at telling us who Barry is. And it kind of continues to evolve as we go on, as like scene by scene. Oh, it's another day and he's wearing the suit again. And he's wearing the suit again. He's changed his tie, but he's wearing the suit. Like it informs us. Like it starts by being like, okay, he's trying to look fancy. And by the end, it's sort of like this charming, dopey thing, this charming, dopey uniform that he's stuck in, because he's in a musical without song and dance, as John Bryan mentions in the that special features thing that you were talking about, Mike. Like it really has this element of, I don't know, vibrance and propulsion, and like it's vibrating. It's constantly vibrating, both in the anxiety of Barry, but then also the excitement of this potential love that is kind of propelling it underneath.
I think it took me probably 2 or 3 times of seeing this movie before I really was able to find the humor in it. Like there was always a couple scenes, even the first time, you know, like him smashing the plunger and beating up the bathroom and stuff like that were like laugh out loud funny. But I don't think I was on this movie's wavelength until maybe the 3rd or 4th time I saw this movie. And now when I watch it, I'm able to see humor everywhere, you know?
Yeah.
Everything Adam Sandler does is almost laugh out loud funny throughout this movie, even from the very first get-go, when he looks like he's about to have a heart attack seeing a little piano get put on the street. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So his body language, everything works for me now. But the first time, this movie is just such an odd duck, you know, and so unique that I didn't know what I was in for. I didn't know what I was watching. Does that ring a bell with you guys at all, or did you guys love it right out the gate?
I did love the movie right out the gate, but I think the humor has come upon rewatches. I think the anxiety of this film is what I really took away the first time I watched it. That one middle scene where his sisters are harassing him, and there's just chaos going on everywhere around him, right? And there also the phone sex ladies also calling him, threatening him. That scene is so well put together that it's hard not to walk away from that film feeling the anxiety, and especially with the first time. And Justin always says this, but good movies get better upon rewatch and stuff like that. Every time I watch this, I think I come away with something different and new. So yeah, I did enjoy it the first time, but upon rewatches, I've discovered new things and the humor in it as well. What about you, Chris?
Maybe I'm just a little bit darker than you guys. I found this movie pretty funny from the get-go. And that was part of what I think drew me to it, as opposed to Magnolia it's a more somber film.
Mm-hmm.
It has its funny moments.
It has its quirks. Yeah.
Yeah. We've actually, Jake, one of my co-hosts on War Start to Midnight, doesn't really care much for PTA or his worldview to the point that he kind of thinks he's a stick in the mud. He's I forget what phrase he used, something like an uncaring god, essentially.
Yeah.
And so I've added in this segment every time we discuss one of his films. What's the funniest part? This was definitely for me the funniest PTA movie for a while, probably until Inherent Vice.
Interesting. That's gonna be my next question. I have a question when you wrap up about P.T. Anderson and humor, but continue.
Okay. But it's, I think it's one that has continued to age well with me. As I have evolved because I was probably 17 when I first saw this, 16, 17. Mm-hmm. I relate to the Barry Egan character in a much different way. As I had different anxiety as a teenager than I do now as a adult. And so it has continued to evolve and transform, kind of in the way that you're talking about, Chris, or with what Justin says is, you continue to get things. I'm continuing to get stuff out of this movie, and even in the smallest way, when he's talking to Robert Smigel, he's the brother-in-law, who's the dentist, and he's just to him about there's just this little moment where he's yeah, but with a doctor it's confidential, right? And just there's so much sadness and comedy in that one little delivery that just I can't explain why I love it so much, but I love I guess because it feels true. It feels real. It doesn't feel cynical.
Yeah.
It's getting at Barry Egan is a very anxious guy, but we're not beating up on him. We're not watching him suffer just to suffer. We're trying to empathize with him. And I think that's what makes the comedy is what keys me in and makes it work for me.
That scene whenever he's talking to his brother-in-law and he's sometimes I just break into tears for no reason, and then he just immediately buries his face in his hands and makes the most comical noise.
And then walks off. And I love the payoff to that. So of course the brother-in-law immediately tells all the sisters, right? Or tells one of them and they tell everybody, but the one sister's what's this deal with you wanting to see a psychiatrist? And Adam Sandler's reaction is so great. And what you were saying, so truthful, he just, what? No, he's caught in the trap, he's cornered physically and, emotionally in that scene. It's so great. Adam Sandler in this, and I know I've sung his praises, but he does something I've done acting, amateur acting, but he does something that is really amazing. And that, if you watch, he blushes in this, and that is not something you can fake. He's really going through these things. because you don't fake a blush, and so to me, that's an actor that's really in it, and Adam Sandler's really in this, and I think he's just great in this.
Well, and I think PTA also cast him because he saw Adam Sandler in, like, he saw that he was more than a Billy Madison character or, Little Nicky or whatever. Like, he saw that there was more to him, and he wrote to the strength that wasn't being given to him for an on-screen presence, and it really shines through.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I was actually watching a Charlie Rose interview before this episode with P.T. Anderson and Adam Sandler from around that time, and he was basically talking about how Adam Sandler's movies were what he would turn to after like a long time of being buried in like the depressing storylines of Magnolia. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I can't do cancer again. I don't want to like deal with like father-son issues one more time, Yeah. What can I watch? And so, at this time, Adam Sandler, like Anger Management hadn't even come out yet. So he was, for the last 10 years prior to that, from like 1993 to 2003, it was like nothing but hits,
Yeah.
So at that time, it was a very different world of Paul Thomas Anderson probably looking at Adam Sandler and being like, this is the guy, this guy's it. So I would wonder what specifically, whether it be Saturday Night Live or what. But I mean, we know Paul Thomas Anderson has an affinity for comedians because look who he's been with.
Well, he casts Robert Smigel, Triumph the Insult Comic Dog, also the guy who made the TV Funhouse on SNL.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
he casts him not even as a funny guy. You have
his first leading man was John C. Reilly.
Yeah, you have Paul F. Tompkins in frickin' There Will Be Blood. Like, he likes comedians. He really likes comedians.
Yeah, and rightfully so, because he brings out performances in them that are always great, it seems like.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was going to ask earlier, it sounds like, Chris, you've already answered, but Chris Reeves, what do you find to be Paul Thomas Anderson's most humorous movie? Because I mentioned earlier that I didn't find the humor in this movie until probably the third or fourth time, and now I think it's hilarious. And I had a very similar experience with There Will Be Blood.
Yeah.
So I'd have to say Punch Drunk Love. That's the movie I've seen the most. I do think that, There Will Be Blood has funny moments, but for me, Punch Drunk Love is the funniest. There's and I probably the caveat would be that I haven't rewatched There Would Be Blood or Inherent Vice or The Master even. I think I've only seen The Master in theaters the once, so I haven't rewatched them enough to find the humor in them, like I did with Punch Drunk Love, so that's probably part of the issue there too.
Sure. And Chris, you mentioned yours was possibly this or Inherent Vice, right?
It's probably Inherent Vice. I mean, and that one's more a straight comedy.
Sure.
It's this absurdist farce. But purely just for Josh Brolin, everything that he's doing in that movie is
eating the freaking popsicle.
Yes, the frozen banana.
Yeah, that's what it was.
It's all just hysterical, and the way I love when Joaquin Phoenix's Doc, he's approaching the I think the police station, and a bunch of cops are coming towards him, and he just like naturally like goes into a ball in a fetal position because he's afraid he's gonna get there's so many little things, and it's like whatever's going on with Martin Short. I could go on forever. Like, that movie is just a treasure trove of like weirdness, and that works really well on a comedic level. But I do think I think there's a lot of humor in PTA. It took me a long time to get there, but I mean, you're right, Mike. Like, there is a lot of comedy in There Will Be Blood. We've talked about that on Magnuson Anderson's. I think Phantom Thread was a very funny movie.
Yeah,
hilarious. Very but he uses it in the right ways to not just kind of throw out jokes because he thinks he's clever and he can get a laugh, but more to try to balance his stories, and especially when he's working in darker territories. Mm-hmm. And I think honestly, Punch Drunk Love is pretty dark territory in places. He uses the humor to kind of bring that levity to allow the audience to get deeper in, because you're not just feeling like, oh my gosh, is this happening? Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. Whether it's cancer or a murderous oil baron or a guy who just can't live with himself moment to moment. And so I think that's one of his kind of hidden powers that I don't know. I don't think people give enough credit to him for that.
I 100% agree. I think if I had to say my favorite, like the most humorous Paul Thomas Anderson movie, to me, probably be Boogie Nights. I think that movie is the one that best balances humor with really heavy drama.
Hey, Mike, how much do you bench?
You know Han Solo? People tell me I look a little bit like him. First of all, I think John C. Reilly is absolutely amazing in Boogie Nights.
Yeah.
Even Mark Wahlberg is like hilarious in that movie. Everyone's firing on all cylinders. I love that movie. But
well, even Philip Seymour Hoffman as Scotty J, while he is a tragic character, there is also some great comedy to him.
Oh man,
as well.
The way he stands.
Yes.
Like when he's first seeing Dirk Diggler film a scene.
Yeah.
And he is just so hot and bothered. It is hilarious.
He is so dynamic in PTA's movies. Like he's never the same character.
Oh, that's why I love The Master. Is I think he cracks me up in The Master. He's such like a big ham. This fraud ham. Anyway, speaking of Philip Seymour Hoffman, that brings me to my point in this movie that I wanted to bring up next, actually, which is that in this movie, I think Philip Seymour Hoffman steals the show every scene that he's in.
Yep.
So, first question, what do you guys think of Philip Seymour Hoffman in this movie? Second question, has there ever been a scene that Philip Seymour Hoffman has not stolen from everyone else?
I definitely have an answer to the second one.
All right, cool. So, first, second, go, Chris. Guest Chris Galegar.
It's never not going to be confusing.
I know, it's driving me nuts. I'm sorry.
What was the first question?
What do you think of the humor in this movie? Or what do you think of Philip Seymour Hoffman in this movie? And then the other one.
I mean, I think he's the perfect foil to Barry, because he is so like overly confident, overly assertive, overly masculine. Macho. Yeah, exactly. And between him and then the brothers that he sends out, like they are the antithesis of Barry, but they are, it's what Barry kind of needs to push himself out of the solipsistic funk that he's in, where he's constantly like, by giving him a problem that's not himself, it actually allows him to get beyond himself and focus on that in a strange way. And Philip Seymour Hoffman as the Mattress Man, he's just so good. I love you guys have seen the Mattress Man commercial, right?
No, it's awesome.
Yeah. Which is like a shot for shot remake of an actual failed commercial. But like, I love that, that doesn't even make it into the movie, but like he's giving it his all there as well.
Yeah. His physical comedy, Philip Seymour Hoffman's physical comedy is just crazy. What he throws his whole body into.
Well, in the way, like, there's so much going on. If you were to go and study that final scene between them, from the, like, it's humorous that he's at the back of a mattress shop getting a haircut, and then he goes to being like assertive and macho, to then being a little bit scared, to then standing his ground again. Like, he's constantly sort of changing his demeanor based on sort of feeding off of either the sister cutting his hair or Barry, and he's like 8 different characters just in that scene.
Yeah, and you get the impression that he is just so incredibly insecure.
Yeah,
at least I do.
Yeah. No, I think that's true, but he's harnessing it in a completely different way than Barry is.
Yeah.
He's using it to, because of that, he's forcing his insecurity on everyone else by overcompensating. To your second question, I would say that the Jason Robards monologue in Magnolia, he is a perfect sort of co-pilot for Robarts there.
Even then, though, he's trying to steal it. He doesn't quite. He's doing what he can.
I mean, it is a nonverbal performance, and he is doing a lot without saying a word. But he's also just like, he's not taking it from Robarts. He is giving us the emotion that, we need to see and feel, because it's just such a harrowing monologue there. So that's about the only one that comes to mind. I mean, generally, it's shakalaka-doo, baby. He's he is chewing the scenery, but it's always fantastic. God, I just thought of what's the Along Came Polly?
Oh my God,
where he's the stage. And he's what is he put? Is he putting on Macbeth and playing everyone, or is it Hamlet?
Something like that, but he decides to play both the antagonist and the protagonist.
Yes.
But doesn't tell anybody before he does.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah. His physical comedy in Along Came Polly is great. Like the first scene when he's like walking across the dance floor and he just like, his whole body, he just falls.
Yeah.
He has like a physical bit where like, and he's a big man. So, and he was like not young at that point in time, right? So it's like, that's a lot to fall down. Like, I'm scared of falling down.
Yeah.
Because I'm scared I might hurt something. So like, to do it on purpose and throw your whole body into it in a comedic way like that, just for a throwaway gag and like a Ben Stiller comedy, I admire it.
In a otherwise forgettable, like, he is the reason that I remember and will catch 5 minutes of that movie if it's on basic cable.
Yeah, agreed. 100% agreed. Chris Reeves, what do you think?
I think Philip Seymour Hoffman is great in this movie. He steals the scenes in a way that doesn't, like, in just the right balance. Like Chris was saying, he's got the right balance to counter off of Adam Sandler's character, Barry, and it just works so well. One of the things I like about that final confrontation, though, I love Barry's tendency, especially when he gets stressed out, to just walk away with phones. He just walks, like he does it when they first get called, when the sex operator first calls him, and he like takes his home phone to work, and then it's even better because he takes the whole cord and he just flies all the way to Utah, and he still has the phone in his hand. Like that's just like one of those little things that's just so hilarious and so good. And actually it works so well for his character because his character's so anxious and so worked up that he's got this one thing on his mind, and he's not even going to set down the phone because he's so focused on this one thing, And I can't really think of a scene that Philip Seymour Hoffman doesn't steal. I think if he steals the Jason Robards scene, then it doesn't work as well. But he's definitely like, he's going all out in listening and serving the emotion. So like, that's definitely something a little bit different. But yeah, Philip Seymour Hoffman, when we lost him, that was a great, great loss for the acting and movies in general.
Yeah.
Agreed there. I'm sure you guys have noticed this, but one thing I didn't notice until probably the second or third time I was watching the movie, probably the third time, did you notice that whenever he is actually shopping for pudding the first time, you can see her behind him?
Yes.
In her red dress?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so when he's like walking down, you can see the aisles behind him, and he's like, what am I looking for? What am I looking for? And he's not quite sure which product he's even looking for yet, but he's looking at all the healthy choice stuff. You can see her behind him, like she's out of focus.
It's
but
red,
he stops,
yeah.
and when he looks at the pudding end cap, he'll stop like right where he's at, but she doesn't know he's going to stop, and she keeps going off screen. And then when she realizes that she's not following him like parallel anymore, she'll back up into frame.
And then when he looks back, she takes off.
Really? I've never noticed that.
So she is hardcore creeping on him.
Yeah.
In this movie.
And I think that's why the love story works. Because if she's not as engaged and weird as he is, then it's a horror movie.
Yeah. Then he's a completely unsympathetic character.
And he is a villain. Yeah. It's only because these are two weirdos who somehow cosmically found each other that this movie works. And that's also what I think I've always loved about it, is it's like taking the meet cute that we all know and just saying like, no, there's a totally different way to approach this that is super weird but super honest too. You know, they're not that far off from real people, even if they are hyperbole, you know, sort of driven by the way, like,
right.
It's because once again, he's functioning in this heightened, almost musical, you know, style of things. So it's this weird premise. It's these weird individuals, and then put it in the hyperbolic machine of bright Technicolor world, and it spits out this thing it's very lovely, and it's like it could have just as easily been a disaster in the hands of someone less capable as it is successful, because he's definitely juggling a lot of things that could just totally fall apart if he wasn't in total command all the time as the director.
I agree. And that's interesting you say that. You said it's like he takes the meet cute and decides to approach it a completely different way. And it's almost like the character of Barry, it's almost like his arc and the message is to let yourself be open to things. It's not so much like one day you're going to cosmically meet someone and they will be perfect, you know, hit it off, and romance will be slapping you in the face and undeniable. Barry probably could have changed his life and been a different guy at any point previously, but he didn't have the strength to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So when she came around and she approached him the right way, not through his sister, where he has anxiety, not where he feels like being judged, but she approached him in a very honest, upfront way, and in such a way that he was receptive to it. That almost seems to be like what the point is, which is that like when you're receptive to things and you push yourself to go outside of your anxiety and your boundaries, you know, great things can happen to you and for you.
Yeah. The last time I watched it, I saw Barry Egan almost as Cinderella, if that makes sense. And Emily Watson's character, it's this weird, she's like motivating him and motherly taking care of him and getting him to do these things. And I don't even know that it's her getting him to do these things. It's the love, you know, like that motivates him to do these. But like especially the scene, and it's a great scene. So he walks all the way down from the apartment after he's kissed her on the cheek, and she calls. And it's a great moment because we think somehow the phone sex operator has gotten a hold of the number there. And then it turns out that it's her, and she's like, I really wanted to kiss you when you left. And he's like, really? And then he runs up, and he can't, it's like he's running through a labyrinth because he can't find her apartment. He's just running and checking the signs. And then finally he bursts through the door, and it's visually amazing looking with those exit signs. And it's just like this endless hall that he has to run down, you know, but that felt like, I don't know, it almost felt like Prince Charming running up the tower and rescuing her or whatever. But it's not motivated in the same way that you would get from a traditional Cinderella story type of thing. So it was interesting to me. And I love that sequence.
Well, it's almost like she's letting him see the full picture too, because his whole world, his like the color palette before she enters the movie, and every time she's not in the movie, is all just blue and gray. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, and then I think she shows up in pink the first time, and then purple, and then red. But after the purple dress, after that, Barry starts wearing a purple tie. And then after he sees her red dress, he starts wearing a red tie.
Yeah, the ties definitely change. I think it's yellow towards the end.
Yeah, so it's almost like she is adding something to his life that was missing before that gives him the ability to grow more, I guess, you know, or see more.
Yeah.
Speaking of the blue suit, by the way, I like how even in the love scene, whenever he goes all the way to Hawaii and they're like kissing on the bed.
Yeah.
He's completely like fully dressed in his suit, jacket and everything, shoes. And he's just laying on top of her, and it just looks so goofy.
But that's part of the comedy is like he's wearing it as a uniform. He is like a, I mean, to go to the blend of the Andersons, like Wes Anderson's always using costumes as a comedic bit. Like basically every character in his film has a standard uniform they wear day in and day out. The fact that he's constantly in that blue suit and we never see him out of it, even though like people have commented on like, why are you wearing a suit? I mean, Luis Guzman in the opening of it. It's like, why are you wearing a suit today? You going to the bank or like, so it's for everyone else. This is the weirdest thing in the world. But for us, like we've met Barry at just the right moment in his life where this seems to be the the person that he is, and it sort of ushers him into this new. It's his uniform for the new Barry, and I love that. I love just the way that he sort of and I think it's also Sandler. Sandler has in himself an anger and a sadness and a comedy, and so that like he can wear that suit in a way that you kind of feel all of that at once. I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm kind of drifting, but it's it's this just
there's a sadness for Adam Sandler. I agree with that.
And
he's tapped into.
You feel it because he kind of looks dopey in the suit, like, to be perfectly honest, but it's endearing.
Yeah, well, even his delivery, like whenever she asks him, he's like, "Are you going to the party tonight?" And he's like, "Yeah." And then she's like, "Because I have like a friend that wanted to meet you," and he's like, "Yeah, no, I don't want to do that." It's just so like sad, but in a relatable way, right? In like a insecure, depressed
absolutely,
way.
Yeah. Like, well, in an anxiety-ridden way. I mean, watching this time around, I saw a lot of Reynolds Woodcock in Barry. I think there's, they are both dealing with stress, anxiety, and depression in different ways, but I think there's a lot of crossover between those two characters in being stuck in your own head and unable to communicate with the outside world what you're feeling. I'm sorry if that went a little too deep.
That's an interesting theme that I guess Paul Thomas Anderson is interested in, the idea that, I guess, a risk of sounding cheesy, love is all you need kind of thing, which is that these difficult, incomplete men who are likable in their own right and talented in their own way maybe need help to self-actualize.
You kind of get that in The Master too, huh?
Yeah, but it's not so much a romantic relationship so much as it is like a paternal one, but paternal relationships are always something he explores as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I think the way that he deals with male-female relationships is also interesting because he doesn't shy away from difficult males, but he also doesn't excuse them either. So like with Reynolds Woodcock, like he's an abusive, person to be in a relationship with, but he's given a partner who can give it back to him. With Barry here, as we've been saying, he's a weirdo, but in Emily Watson's character, we're given someone who is the right sort of yin to his yang, so that it's not just he's putting his self-pitying weirdness on the manic pixie dream girl, but he's paired up with the right person to actually counterbalance that. And I appreciate the fact that he finds a way to, not just make it a one-sided relationship, when he explores these difficult personalities in male-female relationships.
Yeah. In this particular relationship, she has all the power, pretty much. She makes every step of it happen.
She drives the whole thing, yeah, for sure.
I think that's kind of how Barry wants it, too. He doesn't necessarily want that stress or, like, to make those decisions.
Yeah,
or he
probably wouldn't happen otherwise.
Yeah.
Well, but he also needs to feel comfortable in being able to surrender himself. And, like, he's always on guard with his sisters because he's always afraid that they're going to pick on him and call him gay boy.
Yeah.
And, so he almost can't be himself. He's afraid to be himself because he's afraid of what that will lead to, versus with her, he's just willing to be just Barry after a certain point. He's lying to her a little bit up front, but once he realizes that, like, he doesn't need to put his guard up, that's his happy place.
Well, it's because she doesn't run from any of the red flags. Like, he goes and destroys a bathroom restaurant and they get kicked out. And she does not blink an eye. So she's a keeper, I guess.
Yeah.
So have you guys seen the Blossoms in Blood special feature?
Yes.
That Criterion has? It was on the special feature of the special edition DVD back in the day as well.
The Superbit DVD.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember Superbit DVDs?
Mm-hmm.
They used higher bit rates, so you couldn't fit special features on the disc. You had to have a second one. It's a real big selling point when I worked at Best Buy.
Because
well, 2-disc special edition looks way more impressive than just
one disc.
One disc.
It does. It's true.
I was a sucker for that more than a few times.
2 discs for the price of one.
The reason I bring that up is because Blossoms and Blood, Paul Thomas Anderson does this interesting thing with deleted scenes sometimes, where he doesn't just give you traditional deleted scenes. He'll actually edit them to music.
Yeah.
And give you deleted and sometimes alternate takes or longer takes. And he makes them like not quite a music video and not quite a short film. And he did a similar thing with the Master deleted scenes as well. And every time I find it incredibly interesting. And I actually prefer this to just straight up deleted scenes because it makes it feel like it's a own experience, but still part of the same experience somehow.
Well, it also feels like an exploration of what could have been, but then also why he made the decisions that he did. Because there's things in Blossoms and Blood where you see like I think you see him taking different trajectories when he's running back to go kiss her, and there's little things where like I had always assumed, like, I love the way when he goes back to kiss her and he gets lost. Like, there's this almost Buster Keaton moment where he runs down the hallway and then you see him running through multiple doorways, but then he comes back to that first sign that says 200 through 250 this way, 300 this or whatever. And it's like, it's a physical comedy moment. And I had just always assumed, no, that must have been the way that they staged the whole thing. No, like they shot scenes where he goes other directions and runs into other people and all sorts of stuff. And I think I love the way that he pieces it together, though, because you kind of get the feeling of like, oh, here's a nugget of if they had gone this direction, perhaps how that scene would have played out. Because it's not just montage of like, oh, here's the pretty moments, but you'll get a few little constructions within a scene before it jumps around to something else sometimes. And so you can see how they were piecing those building blocks together that they ultimately decided they weren't going to use because they found a different way to do it. For me as an editor, like I find that really fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. I felt the same way about the ones that on the Master. I don't remember what he called the ones that were removed on the Master, but I think they're equally, if not more interesting than the outtakes for Punch Drunk Love.
Yeah. Well, it also tells you, like, as for a director who a lot of people put a lot on his shoulders and, you know, think of him as like, oh, he is a cinema god. He always knows what he's doing. Like, you also get the idea of like, okay, no, he has to figure it out just like everyone else.
Yeah.
He just has really good intuition.
Yeah. He even said with the Master, there was a lot of stuff that's not included, but whenever he got into the editing room, he found that the movie that he was making turned out to be the relationship between these two guys more than exploring religion or anything like that. So he said that's kind of what he stuck to, is just those were the marching orders, which was just everything that wasn't about that relationship was less important. Yeah.
Well, and that's what makes him a good director, though. The fact that he can identify that and then say, okay, even though I was so married to this other idea, I'm gonna throw that out because
this is what's coming alive.
Yeah, it doesn't reflect on the thing that is working, and so it's just going to bog it down. Whereas another director would have said, oh, well, it's a movie that's about this father-son relationship, and it's about religion, and it's about impotency, and it's about, you know, all of these. Mm-hmm. And he can really say, and, you know, also I think something worth noting about Punch Drunk Love, you know, this is coming off of 2 epically long films, and he turns in a 95-minute movie. You can literally watch this twice before you watch Magnolia.
Yeah, it's mercifully short.
Yeah. Like the fact that he does that, and it's not just like when Francis Ford Coppola made Jack just to prove that he can make a movie under budget. Like he's actually like accomplishing his goal in all ways. He's still making a fantastic film. He's, you know, doing something that's light and for him extremely comedic, for him at the time for sure. You're doing all of these things that felt like they were against the intuition of what we had come to expect from him. And I think that shows his strength as a director as much as anything.
Yeah, I agree. That's a talent in itself of being able to, I think the expression is kill your darlings or kill your babies.
Yeah.
So, that takes a lot to do. A lot of directors more famous than him can't do it, even ones that I'm fan of. But then again, P.T. Anderson can certainly self-indulge.
Oh, for sure.
But I think he finds a good balance with it, I think. That
I think he knows when he's aware of when he's self-indulgent. And because of that keeps him in check.
Yeah, I agree with that.
The only other thing that I had was I just goddamn fucking love that Nilsson song with Shelley Duvall from Popeye.
He needs me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to sing it, but
it's I don't know. Are you guys familiar with Harry Nilsson?
Yeah.
Harry Nilsson is the fucking shit.
He came on my Discover Weekly. One of his songs came on my Discover Weekly recently on Spotify.
He's so fucking good. But like that song is such a Nilsson song. If you listen to it melodically, it's just like it has this bounciness to it. And Shelley Duvall is like, she's not a great singer, but that's what makes it so like fun and endearing. I just love it.
I remember the first time I saw Punch Drunk Love, I had never heard that song before, and I was like, "What is this?" But I love it. Yeah, I agree. It's the perfect song for that movie. It's so like quirky, like the pep in his step when he's getting off the plane.
Yeah.
My favorite laugh in the whole movie is whenever he sees her in Hawaii for the first time and he walks up to her and he extends his hand for a handshake.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she goes in for a hug, and that to me cracks me up every single time.
Well, that's so Barry.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's perfect.
That moment's great. And then, it's lit so well, the music, and, like they're in silhouette, and then all the people, as they start to kiss, just start walking by, it's just like time's going by as they are embraced. It's so great.
Well, I love, there's a cut when she comes around the corner where it's basically, instead of cutting on action, it's doubling up the action. So from the wide, we see her come around and start to come up the steps, and then when we cut to her tight, she comes around the corner again and comes up. So it's this like double take of the moment, like he's playing with time and space in this way that is setting us up for that moment when they kiss, and it just feels like there's this explosion of people. It's just like that is a perfectly paced and cut and executed scene, like just so good.
I'll tell you this, Paul Thomas Anderson can film a first kiss also, because the dolly in whenever like he finally gets to her door, it reminded me of that scene in Magnolia between John C. Reilly and Melora Walters, where it just seems like he has such a taste for romance and like cinematic romance.
Yeah, I think he does. I think he definitely does, and he has a like it's a warm fuzzy for him, which is the type of thing that on the surface we may not expect from PTA, but that's what makes him so good. Is he's got a really deep tool belt, and he's very capable of pulling it off.
Yeah, humor and maybe his taste for romance are things that maybe get overlooked a lot whenever maybe talking about his career as a whole and like his traits and like what you think of when you think of PTA. I think I'll have a lot of like dad issues and a lot of drama, but I very rarely hear, humor or, nuance like that kind of romance involved in describing him.
But it's because they're supporting the other big propulsive things most of the time. And here we're getting that on display as like sort of first and foremost the entree.
Yeah. I would like to see P.T. Anderson go back into another romantic comedy. That'd be interesting.
I would too. I'd love to see him do, I would love to see him do a musical, like just full out.
That'd be great.
Complete.
Yeah, he just recently did, I haven't seen it yet. What was that music video that he did?
Well, he did the one for Tom York.
Yeah.
Anemic? Is that what it's called? Or Anemia? Yeah.
Anemia, that might be it, yeah.
Yeah. It's really good. The choreography in that thing is amazing. But I mean, he's done a lot of music videos. He's done a lot of stuff for Haim. He's done, is it Hot Knives that he did for Fiona Apple? That video is amazing.
He also did Across the Universe for Fiona Apple as well.
Yeah. But I would love to see him do a full-blown MGM Technicolor musical. Like, I think he could. Maybe it's maybe it's not the right time now because we've just so recently had La La Land.
Did you guys know in Magnolia that Thomas Jane plays the young Jimmy Gator?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Only because I learned that when doing research for our discussion of Magnolia on Magnificent Andersons.
I found out right now because I was looking at Melora Walters' name. That blows my mind. Anyways, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
No, that's fine.
It was important.
It was very important. I think I'm wrapped on.
Are you spent?
Well, I mean, like I have other things, but they're like insignificant as far as like we could talk about Jeremy Blake and the painting and stuff, but I think that would probably just be a tangent on top of like I think we've had a pretty solid,
healthy conversation.
Yeah. We're getting up there in the
runtime. So let's move on to picking the next Casually Criterion. All right, guys. So that does it for our review of Punch Drunk Love. Thank you so much. If you have any thoughts about our review, if you want to get a hold of Chris and let him know if he was right or if he was wrong, we'll be sure and give his contact information at the end of the show. All right. So guys, our theme was chosen by our guest, Chris. So
2.0.
Yeah, 2.0. Chris, so why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about what theme you chose, and then we'll say which movies we chose for the audience to be able to vote on.
Okay, so when you guys approached me and said that I could pick the theme, I knew I wanted to be selfish in the kind of stacking the deck in some way so that whatever it is that you guys are discussing next is something that I'm really into. And my first thought ended up being my favorite thought. And it was basically like immediately when Chris Reeves brought this to me, I thought, oh, well, Powell and Pressburger movies, The Archers, some of the, and luckily Criterion has several of their films in the collection and a lot of them streaming on Criterion Channel right now. So there's a whole lot to choose from. They were just, I don't know. I think they are, while it's not that they are unknown, I still think they are overlooked masters for what they accomplished in the like 10 years that Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger were working together. And like everything from their use of editing, storytelling, like they use narrative in a really amazing way, particularly for the time. They were just leaps and bounds, years, decades ahead of where film was eventually going to end up. And you see that in basically every single one of their films. So there's not really a wrong answer in any of the picks here. And that's what I wanted to come up with. So Michael Powell, Emmerich Pressburger, The Archers. What did you guys pick out?
Okay, so I'll go first because I teased it earlier in the show. I mentioned that I had watched a movie called Black Narcissus with my girlfriend, and I was going to save it, and this is why. This was directed by Powell and Pressburger from The Archers. This is probably my favorite movie of theirs that I've seen. It's one of the best uses of color of any movie I can think of.
One of the most amazing uses of matte paintings as well.
Oh, absolutely. And miniatures. The last 20 minutes of this movie, the first time I saw it, completely blew me away. And I didn't know where it was going. And I won't hint any more than that. But this movie spoke to me on a lot of levels. And I think it's quite beautiful. Just absolutely beautifully put together. Wonderfully filmed. And it goes some pretty interesting places. Especially for like the late 40s.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely pushing some boundaries.
Yeah. So, yeah, Chris Reeves.
I chose a film that I've already seen as well, and I came across it because of Martin Scorsese. He loves this film, and I actually really enjoy it too, but it's The Red Shoes. Yeah, I would love to watch it again, but also I wouldn't mind watching Black Narcissus probably either. That's one that I haven't seen either, so I'm excited about either one of these. Chris 2.0. What is yours?
Well, if any of you have seen this film, you probably already know where I'm going, as when you introduced me on the show, Chris, you said that my podcast is called War Starts Midnight. That is a direct homage to the film that I'm picking. It is The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp by Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger.
Awesome.
This is my favorite film of all time. It is just remarkable. I mean, and I don't want to put anyone off with this statement, but it's 2 hours and 45 minutes and it breezes by.
It does.
It is incredible. I can't tell you how many people I've shown this to, and just like my whole thing is always watch the first 15 minutes, and if you're hooked, just keep watching. If it's not for you, don't, turn it off and go do something else. No one turns it off. It is just a remarkable use of so many things, and a big influence on Scorsese. I mean, Scorsese was a huge fan of the Archers in general. Thelma Schumacher later went on to marry Michael Powell later later in his life. His Martin Scorsese's editor. But this is the story of, it spans 40 years, and it's the story of Clive Candy. He's a career military man in the British Army. And so it starts in the early 20th century and goes up through World War II. And so many interesting editorial tricks, narrative tricks, uses of camera and doubles and space and time and just everything. Montage. Every time you kind of think you know where this movie is going, it pushes in another direction and starts just running in a very exciting sort of way. I try to watch this movie at least once or twice a year, just because I don't know how many times I've seen it now, but like I'm still getting something out of it every single time I watch it. Also, if you need a little more of a nudge, if you're a fan of Grand Budapest Hotel, watch this movie. You will see so much influence on that film in this, from use of palette to sets to the use of the term "war began at midnight," as Wes Anderson uses in Life and Death of Colonel Blip, or in the Grand Budapest Hotel. And if you want to have a drinking game, drink every time someone says "war starts at midnight" in the movie.
Yeah, I have seen all of these movies. I completely agree. There's no wrong answer. So
no, absolutely not.
All right, I think that does it for the show. Chris Reeves, do you want to take us out?
All right, guys, thanks for listening, and we want to make sure that we thank Jake Wagner Russell for the intro-outro music, and you can visit his stuff at soundcloud.com/bobscotch.
All right, stay tuned to this channel. Our next episode is going to be over, I guess, Zombieland 2? Double tap?
I believe that's, unless something else pops up.
Yeah, unless something better shows up. And we just put out an episode on El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, and Joker. So it's been a pretty big month. So check out this channel. And if you want to reach out to us, as always, again, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at casualcinecast. And you can email us at casualcinemedia@gmail.com.
Thanks, Chris, for being on the show. And make sure that you guys go check out War Starts at Midnight. That's a great podcast. I've been listening to their Anderson series, and I highly recommend it. They got me to watch Hard 8 again, which I can't thank them enough for, because that movie's great. And thanks for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. We've taken a bit of a break just to kind of pile up the episodes, but once they start rolling for Magnificent Andersons, they should keep on coming. So check back and enjoy what we've got. We've also got we went through all of John Carpenter's stuff over like a year and a half.
It's a good series, yeah.
So that's worth checking out, especially it's October. Check some of that stuff out as well. warstartsatmidnight.com. We're on the interwebs at WSAM Pod for everything else. Thank you guys so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
It was our pleasure. We appreciate it.
For sure. All right, guys. We'll talk to you next time.
See you later.